morning, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Kaylin, your geek girlfriend. As you can see, we're back in the car again, but today is Thursday, August the 14th, which means that this video is not going to be entitled Summer Rides and Reads because summer has unfortunately come to an end. And here we are again on our morning commute, headed back to work to start the school year. And today's video, like I said, it's not going to be a summer rides and reads. It's just going to be a ride and read. But I really like filming these videos in my car. I think it gives me something to do, gives me a way to pass the time, makes my commute a little bit more productive, and it helps me not have to worry about trying to dedicate time to filming when I get home, because I end up forgetting or I end up getting caught up in other things, and then these videos get put off, and I don't want to do that. So this is a great way for me to kind of maximize my time, kill two birds with one stone, as they say. I'm in the car anyway by myself, and might as well just use that time to be doing something that I consider productive and really maximizing the time. So today's book is actually book number 24 of the year. If you're new here, our challenge for this year is to read 48 books this year. That's just under 4 books a month. Now, I do have a book that I'm working on right now that's actually a beta novel, so it has not been released yet, so super excited about that. And I will be doing a review once the book has been released, but this book will count for my reading count, but I can't really track it on Goodreads or anything yet. But that's not the book that we're going to talk about today because, like I said, I'm still reading it and it hasn't been published yet. Today we're going to talk about the 2022 book of the year, and that is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And this was a Book of the Month Club book if you subscribe to that. I've heard mixed reviews about that. I am not a member of the Book of the Month Club. I actually got this book as a blind date with the book. Probably about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. You guys know that sometimes my husband and I like to go to the half-price books kind of in the Cincinnati area, so we kind of go a little bit south, and we go around to all the local half-price books, and there's one location in the Cincinnati area that has these blind dates with a book, and every time I'm there I get like 3 or 4 of them because I just think they're so fun. And this book, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, the book that we're going to talk about in this video, was one of those. The cover of this book is really unique. I don't have it with me because I am in the car. I will try and take a picture of it and have it as the thumbnail for you guys to see. But the cover of this book is very, very interesting. It features a wave, which is a pretty big part of the story. And kind of the metaphor of the book itself. And then it has like this really pretty rainbow font, and then it also does come with a slipcover. I have the hardcover version, but this is by Gabrielle Zevin. Gabrielle Zevin also wrote I think it's like the storied life of AXAL something. And I have that book as well. So I might be looking to read that one this year just so I can complete both of the books by her, because this is not her debut novel. I did use this book to fulfill a couple of different challenges. So I'm doing obviously the Goodreads reading challenge. Like I said, we're reading 48 books this year, trying to make 12 of those, or not 12 of those, 8 of those nonfiction. And I have 2 nonfiction books in the works right now, which again, we'll review after those are complete. So that's why my reading numbers have been a little bit lower this year, because I'm reading more books at a time. So I'm reading a novel, I'm reading the beta book, and then I'm also reading 2 nonfiction books at the same time, and kind of just periodically dipping into those, reading 20 to 30, maybe 50 pages of that in a sitting, and then putting it away and getting it out a few weeks later. But I have 2 nonfiction books that are currently in the works. So that's why my numbers are a little bit lower. So when I start to dog myself about, oh, you haven't met your reading goal, blah, 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 then I'm just like, but you're like, I'm reading a lot. I'm just reading a lot of things. Obviously, with the school year starting back up, my time to read is going to be a lot more limited. So I actually told myself that when we get home today, we're going to read more of that beta novel to try and get that completed before the deadline. And if you are a new author and are looking for someone to beta read or do an advanced reader review, please reach out. You can comment, you can send me a link. You can message me over on Instagram at your geeky girlfriend with the _ same as my YouTube handle, because I love reading and rating books, and I've actually done several beta reviews here on this channel. I reviewed The Metallic Heart by Leona West. I reviewed The Locket, and I've done a couple of books by Brianna Wade Quinn. And so I always will put in the description of the video if it's a debut or a beta read or whatever. Anyway, let's get back on track. So tomorrow follows really two friends, Sam and Sadie, but then it also kind of follows their friend Marks as well. And Sam and Sadie come from, they both originally were born in California. They meet at a hospital, and I'm not going to give you any more plot details about that because some of you might be like, oh, this is exactly like 5 feet apart. It's not, but they meet at a hospital through a series of unfortunate events, for lack of a better phrase, and they kind of become fast friends over video games. So there are very strong themes of video games in this novel, and they use the metaphor of like life being like a video game repeatedly throughout the book. And they also, the cover and the title, Tomorrow, comes from the famous monologue of Macbeth, because Marks, one of the characters in the novel, was actually a college actor who portrayed different Shakespearean characters while he was in college theater. So he's a big Shakespeare fan. So the author uses that as a running metaphor as well. And kind of this idea that video games are, you know, the opposite of life because you get to do it over and over and over again. They're kind of like the antithesis of life, but having video games in your life might make life worth living. So it's just kind of a complex metaphor with lots of different layers. But Sam and Sadie meet and bond over video games. They go about their lives and their friendship ebbs and flows, which is why I said that the book also has a strong metaphor of waves, because they start off really good friends and then something happens and then they come back together and then something happens and then they come back together. So it kind of goes through like the tides of friendship and the waves and the ebbs and flows of a friendship and the ebbs and flows of life and how to get through that together with friends and what all that means for different people. And this book also explores grief and what grief looks like for different people, because each of the characters experiences grief in a different way, and each of the characters kind of has views relationships in a different way, views intimacy in a different way based on their parents, based on their childhood. So it's got a lot of like nurture versus nature themes, but I highly recommend knowing something about video games. You don't have to play video games. I do not prescribe to play a lot of video games. However, let me just go through some of the ones that are mentioned in this book. And not only video games, role-playing games, all of the things. So Super Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, Call of Duty, Metal Gear Solid, let's see. I'm trying to think of some other ones that are Dungeons and Dragons is mentioned often. Tetris, I think, is mentioned, and Oregon Trail, and I think the Wii is mentioned in like Wii Sports, and yeah, so having a knowledge of some popular video games, especially popular video games from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, because that's when this book takes place, and a little bit earlier, is helpful because they will reference things or they'll make a metaphor, like they being the author, it'll be like, oh, just like in Metal Gear Solid when da-da-da-da-da. And so you kind of have to have an idea of at least what type of games these are, right? Super Mario, I think everybody knows what Super Mario Bros. Is, especially even if you have little kids and you watch the movie. You bounce around on different platforms and try to save Princess Peach, and you hit the flags and you get the little mushrooms and stuff like that. And they make a lot of references to that one. Donkey Kong, same thing. Mario jumps over the barrels trying to save Princess Peach from Donkey Kong. So I think everybody knows those ones, but it's those more unique ones, like Oregon Trail. I had heard of Oregon Trail, didn't quite know what it is, and they give some descriptions of some of the games, but I also think understanding what it means when they say console gaming versus PC gaming, like they talk about all of this. So these characters are really, really involved in the video game industry, and in fact, Sam and Sadie actually go on to be video game designers in the book. And so they design their own video game. They're talking about game engines, they're talking about game design, and obviously all of those details are very, very niche, and you don't have to know what these different video game engines are, but I think just having an idea of what they're talking about is helpful. Now, I think that if you don't know anything about video games, you can pick up that the book is mostly like they work in the video game industry and they make video games for a living. I think you can figure that out, and the rest of it would kind of be similar to reading a fantasy book and then not really getting invested in the world building, right? Or, when I reviewed Fourth Wing, I was talking about how there was a lot of world building that I was just like, I don't really care about their castle and the classes that they're taking, but I like the dragons. So I think it's the same thing. I think you could look at this, whether this book would be considered science fiction, maybe because it's like highly involved in tech. I'm not sure. Maybe it would be considered science fiction, definitely contemporary, because like I said, it was the 2022 book of the year. Now, do I feel that this book should have been the 2022 book of the year? I can see why it was. I'll say that. I will say I did not 5-star this book. I did give it 4 stars though. I felt that it was my complaint with this book, and the reason why I didn't give it 5 stars, was because I felt that this book read like a bell curve, and that it started off really, really slow, and I had like to really work to get invested, and then I was invested for a significant chunk, and then it kind of dropped down, and then it picked back up again within the last 100 pages or so. I read like in 2 different settings, I read like 100 pages at a time. And this book has 400 pages, so then the other 200 were kind of a drag to get through, which is why I rated it on Storygraph as a medium-paced book. I think for some people it would be highly engaging. I don't really know what it was about the beginning. I think for me it was the writing style in the beginning, because the author bounces back and forth between what's happening in the present and what's happening in the past. And there's no real seamless transition into that. It'll just be like, oh, Sam was standing at the train station and he remembered the first time he met Sadie. And then next paragraph, he was in the hospital. Like it takes your brain a second to be like, oh, wait, we're going back to the past now. And so I wish there would have been some way to indicate, just because I feel like it would have made it read a little bit easier, just a way to indicate when we were going back in time and at what point in time we were going to. And also with that, she would jump, especially in the beginning, she would jump to the future and talk about the time period that the book ends. So this book takes place over the course of like 16 years. And so in the beginning portion, this book, it has interesting chapter numbers too. It almost has like a table of contents in the beginning. And then you can it like has 3 different parts or 4 different parts, and then each part has different chapters. And so in part 1, she is alluding to she's giving you a foreshadowing of where the story is going to go, which that's all fine and good. I'm fine with that. But she was flashing forward to like events that occurred during part 3 without giving you a semblance of time, or actually that's not even true. I think she did give a semblance of time, but it was like she would jump forward and be like, oh, according to Sam in this interview, okay, but why is, like, I mean, yes, you'd use your critical thinking and figure out why he was interviewing, because they do end up developing a game, but still, like, but in that same part, she would also jump back to the past. So for me, getting on a consistent timeline was difficult, and it made the pace read a little bit slower, especially in the beginning. The third part read, like, the second part was okay. I didn't really have any issue with pacing. Third part, same thing, didn't really have any issue with pacing. And then I think in the fourth part, I think I was just disappointed a little bit in the ending, and I just kind of wanted a little bit more for these characters in the end. I think everybody everybody's ending suited them, I guess you could say, but I just felt like after everything they had been through, you know, I'm a hopeless romantic when it comes to stories like this, and I just kind of wanted a different ending for the two of them together. But anyway, like, that's a slight spoiler. Sorry about that, but I tend to talk about the endings a lot in vague terms. Let's see, what else? The pacing was why I didn't give it a 5-star. Now, character development, I felt it was complicated. You know, Storygraph, if you're a user of Storygraph, gives you those options like, oh, did you think there was good character development? I felt like some of the characters, yes. Like, I felt like Marks was a really good character. I felt he had developed nicely. Sadie, I felt like not really. And Sam, I felt like kind of. Like, he did, and then he kind of stalled out, and then he did again. So that's why I said that was complicated. I do think Marks was my favorite character in the story, and I think his story was the most intriguing, possibly. And if you've read the book, you might be like, well, that's, what the heck? What are you thinking that for? To each their own. A lot of people will probably find Sadie's character really endearing. I did not. I really did not find Sadie's character that endearing. I mean, she was okay, but I just felt like she was probably my least favorite character, honestly, out of the main characters. And I also did not like Dove at all, but I think you're not supposed to really like him. And then there is a lot of inclusion in this book. Sam, the male lead character, actually suffers in a car accident and suffers a injury, which causes him to have a physical disability. I'm not going to go too much into that in case you have not read it, because I do try and keep these reviews spoiler free, but he suffers an accident, causes him to be physically, have a physical disability, which impacts his ability to ambulate, but at the same time, he has a strong sense of independence in his ability to ambulate. He is able to drive, he's able to get himself to work, so he has a strong sense of independence pretty much all throughout the book, because he doesn't want people to feel sorry for him. He doesn't want people to kind of have this ableist attitude. There's also some different religions expressed in the book. And for example, Judaism, and Sadie has a bar mitzvah at one point, but then we also have some different races. So Sadie is supposed to be Eastern European. Like I said, she is Jewish, but then Marks and Sam are both Japanese, like, you know, biracial, American Japanese or American Korean. And they talk about their cultures and how they grew up living in K-Town, which is a borough of like Los Angeles, and then / California. I'm not exactly sure where it sits in comparison. And then also Marks at one point takes a trip to Japan, and you kind of, the author kind of talked about that and seeing the cherry blossom trees and some of the different more typical thoughts of Japan. And then they also talk about some racial stereotypes and how the characters kind of overcome those. Religious stereotypes, same thing. And then there is some LGBTQIA, like, they're not major by any means. They're very subtle, but there is some of that representation as well. There are just some like notes for the adults watching this video, because I always try and like let you know what age this book would be appropriate for. Definitely adults. I don't think it would be appropriate for a 14 or a 15-year-old to read this book. There is drug use, there is violence, there's some BDSM. Again, none of these things are very explicit. It's like one scene or two throughout the entire 400 pages. It's not like it's 50 Shades of Grey or something like that. But there is some sexual content, there's drug use, there is drinking at different points, and there's a variety of drug use, I'll say that. And then there is some violence. I won't describe what. And then there's also a pregnancy, and this one I do feel like I have to spoil, because I feel like this is a big no-no trigger for some people. One of the characters does get an abortion during the events of the novel. Again, it is mentioned very briefly in probably one paragraph of text. It is not something that is explicitly seen or viewed by the reader. It is just something that she kind of recounts in her past. You can probably figure out which character it is, but I do feel like that, sorry, the sun is like right there. I do feel like that I have to disclose that one because I have put books down or not read portions of books because characters were even considering abortions. So that for me is a big no-no trigger. I didn't love that, and that probably affected my rating as well. I didn't love that that was a storyline that was included. However, because it was only one paragraph of text, it's not mentioned until well into part 3, if not part 4 of the novel. It's kind of towards the end, and she just simply is recalling the experience and how isolating it was, etc., etc. I didn't like close the book and not finish it because of it, but I do feel like that is the one thing that I am going to kind of spoil and say that it does talk about that. So when we're talking about age of this book, even if it was geared towards maybe a young adult audience, I would disagree with that. I think this is an adult novel, and also like adult novel because most adults, people my age, millennials, would be able to relate to these games and these activities and these time periods of the late 90s, early 2000s, which is when the majority of the events of the book kind of take place. So I think millennials is a good age to enjoy this book. Overall, like I said, I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. That equates to like a 7.5 to an 8 on out of a 10. I feel that depending on what mood I'm in, on what day, I might rate that a little bit higher, a little bit lower. But on the day that I reviewed it, and I still feel pretty strong about that rating, with it being a 4-star. Like I said, I think this is suitable for college kids or millennials. I really think that it should be more of an adult novel. And if you like video games, you're probably going to like this one, even if you're not a big fiction person, but video games are kind of your thing, then I recommend checking this one out. We are approaching our destination, and luckily I don't think I have anything else to say about this one. Let me know in the comments if you have read this one and your thoughts on it. Like I said, it was the 2022 book of the year. I can see why, because of all the representation and all of the kind of things that the characters get into. Whether it still stands now in 2025, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think that's it for this one. Thank you guys for hanging out with me again. Thank you guys for being here on my channel. Make sure you check out my most recent video. It was a long one, but make sure you check it out because it's kind of a more vulnerable one. Some new content is coming, so make sure you check that out. And I think that is it. Until next time, if you are a teacher and are heading back to school, I wish you all the best, and I wish you joy in these first few days. I wish you professional developments that don't make you want to gouge your eyes out. And I wish you a great school year and a safe and happy end of August. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.